Welcome to Martian Histories, the final episode of Series 2 of the Oral History Picture Podcast, celebrating the people, the places and the marshes of the Lower Waveney Valley. For the final episode, we're going to attempt to take you on a journey through 1,000 years of Carlton history, from the Domesday Book to the present day, in not much more than 10 minutes. Actually, we need to start by going back thousands of years to when this part of Suffolk, in fact most of the east coast of England, including East Anglia, was connected to mainland Europe. Approximately 7,000 years ago, the site of Carlton Colville was actually part of what was known as Doggerland, until rising waters swallowed the land, creating the North Sea. As the Carlton Marshes wetlands began to emerge, people began to make use of them. And in the centuries that followed, reeds and rushes were gathered for thatching, cattle grazed the drier ground, and peat was dug on East Heath. The marshes were shaped by people, with dikes, drains, banks and ditches, some of which still mark the landscape today. So although Carlton Marshes looks wonderfully wild, much of the landscape is actually the result of hundreds of years of people working with water and land. And today, that relationship continues. Since 2008, Suffolk Wildlife Trust has pieced the marshes back together through 18 separate land purchases, which is why Carlton Marshes is now a nature reserve spanning 405 hectares, the largest in the Southern Broads, with grazing marsh, fen, peat pools and wet woodland. It's home to water voles, rare fen raft spiders and marsh harriers, birds that were perilously close to disappearing from Britain in the 1970s, but which are now an everyday sight above Carlton. So before we get to our 1,000 years of recorded history, we've already got thousands of years of landscape history. Carlton Hall was the manor house of the parish, and it seems likely there was an even earlier hall standing on this site as far back as 1086, when the Domesday Book was compiled. There was just one manor here at that time, which, before the Norman conquest, was held by a Saxon named Burghard, who had 240 acres of land, plus woodland, and 4 acres of meadow. Construction of the building we see today started in 1736 and replaced a medieval hall thought to date back to the 13th or 14th century, which was destroyed by fire. Here's how they described it in the parish register. Fire! On Sunday, April 18th, 1736, Carlton Hall, bakehouse, barn and stables were burnt down by a foul chimney taken fire. The rebuilt Carlton Hall stood at the heart of a working farm for 2.5 centuries. In 1929, Percy Mobbs bought the hall and its land. In the farm diary of that year, it records that he employed 8 regular workers, grew wheat, barley, oats, peas, sugar beet, hay and potatoes, and also had a dairy herd of 30 cows. By 1940, the workforce had grown to 26 farm workers, of which one was my 15-year-old Uncle Peter, my mum's brother, who worked there until he joined the army. Those who grew up in the village from the 1960s to the 1980s particularly remember old Mr. Mobbs for not letting us have any conkers from the trees near his front gate. Not that that stopped anyone climbing under or over it, although the boys would quickly scarper whenever his green pickup appeared round the corner. The Mobbs family remained here for more than 50 years, but by the end of that time, the traditional family farm was coming to an end. Percy worked the land until his death in 1982, and in 1986, Carlton Hall was converted into a residential home, and since then, a retirement village has been built around it, with 150 residents living there today. Between 1940 and 1945, in the Second World War, Carlton Colville found itself vulnerable to attack due to the village's proximity to Lowestoft. Canon Bignold, rector of St Peter's Church, wrote on the 10th of February 1940, "Aeroplanes continually over us all this morning and afternoon. One was thought to be a German, as it had a smoke screen behind it, and was apparently being chased by ours. The village was machine gunned from the air. Bombs would fall, and aircraft forced landed or crashed." On the 14th of March 1945, a B-17 Flying Fortress left the United States Army Air Force Base at Lebanon, heading for Germany. Over Holland, the American crew experienced problems with a No. 2 engine and had to abort the mission. Over the North Sea, on their way back to Lebanon, the troublesome engine caught fire, and as the Flying Fortress came into Lowestoft, just north of the Clermont Pier, at 2:47 p.m, its port wing was ablaze. While losing height, the crew bailed out. 7 survived. Radio operator Douglas Sievert was killed when he struck the aircraft's tail unit and his parachute was ripped apart. Pilot Robert Porch stayed at the controls, trying to steer the burning, bomb-laden aircraft away from the houses. Too low to bail out, he attempted a belly landing across the fields at Grove Farm near Hadnam's farm, but the Fortress struck wartime anti-tank blocks and exploded with wreckage spread over a wide area. Robert Porch's body was found in a tree 100 yards away. He had managed to clear the aircraft, but was too low for his parachute to open. Had the aircraft crashed in Lowestoft or Carlton Colville with its load, there would surely have been more casualties. And yet the story did not end there. In 1986, during the construction of what would become the Dales housing estate at Carlton Colville, parts of the B-17 aircraft were unearthed. An engine, propeller blades, an oxygen mask, and other fragments of the aircraft that had fallen into Carlton's fields more than 40 years earlier. Today, the names of those men remain part of the village. Fortress Road remembers the name of the aircraft. Porch Close remembers the pilot who stayed at the controls. Sievert Close remembers the radio operator who never made it home. Ohio Close, named after the home state of crew members. Bloomfield Way, named after the pilot's hometown. What happened in Carlton Colville during the war is not just something recorded in old newspapers and photographs. It's on the signposts and part of Carlton's map today. Carlton Colville is now a town. In my lifetime, the place has grown beyond recognition. In 1971, the census recorded nearly 2,500 people lived here. 4 big housing developments arriving since 1980 have pushed that figure to more than 8,000. And with another 900 homes now planned for the Bell Farm development, it won't be long before Carlton is heading towards a population of 10,000. The village got town status in 2011, partly I think to make sure it didn't just become another part of Lowestoft. But most people I know still think of it as a village. In 2026, Carlton was in the news when it found itself judged by a rather different authority. Town Tickers, a popular travel review account on TikTok, came to town to give their thoughts on the place.
Is this Suffolk town even worthy of its town status? Let's find out.
They found a care home, a horse in a field, a couple of pubs, and apparently not much else.
There's a big transport museum and a very pretty church, but there aren't that many options if you want to buy some merch.
Their verdict, 3.5 out of 7, which does feel a little bit harsh, but also raises the question, what actually makes a place a town? And that got me thinking about the Carlton that I remember and the village my 90-year-old mother knew when she was growing up. So to bring Series 2 to a close, I've written a poem. The Making of a Town. The 40s childhood my mother knew, the farmers' fields where bungalows grew. From the old golf course to the Carlton Crown, in the village she's always known and called her own. But here comes the concrete army, up go the new estates. I'm down the playing field, footy with my mates. An ear out for Paravani, his tune circling round the village that turned into a town. They planned so many houses, but no route from here to there. A bypass for the cars, but no through roads anywhere from Meadow Park to Marshland. So let's start to stroll around. Village, meet estate. Make these neighbourhoods our town.